And we are live. Here we go. Well, welcome everybody to my show. Get me someone who can sell. And today, my name is Olga. I always forget to introduce myself. Olga Pishtanka. I'm the host and the founder of Revenue Hire. And usually on this podcast and this live, we talk to sales leaders and salespeople about how they did what they did, their recipe for success. But today I have a treat for y'all. So I got somebody who understands something that drives sales, which is marketing. So we're going to talk to Craig Andrews. So let me tell you a little bit about Craig. I met Craig a couple months ago, and he and I have had multiple chats, and I can talk to him forever. And I said, you know what? I got to get you on my show so we can talk about this forever dilemma between sales and marketing. And Craig is somebody who gets both, which is very, kind of rare these days. So Craig comes from corporate. Welcome, Craig. Let's just welcome you first of all.
Olga,
Hey.
it's remember, I think we met before, unless there's someone else from Kaliningrad here in Austin.
Yes, we met at gosh, I it always escapes my
Wizard Academy.
it's here in Austin. So we met some years ago, and then we reconnected. So I always forget that part. But Craig comes from corporate marketing. So he spent about 10 years in kind of cell phone, big companies over there, helping the market their stuff. He's responsible for about half a billion, guys, $500 million in sales that he helped drive. And then he started his business 15 years ago. And he quickly realized that referrals can only take you so far when you sell high ticket. And he set out the way to figure out how to build a company and drive business where you don't have to rely on the referrals. So for those of you who are listening to us today, and either you are in sales and you're running your own book, or you are a CEO of a company that sells high ticket, services, consulting services, or anything really high ticket, or you are in charge of the sales team and you want your marketing to be more dialed in, this is the conversation for you today, because Craig is going to talk to us about what is his formula that he figured out. It's not that hard, it's not that complicated, but it's very unique. And he uses the word irresistible marketing, which is kind of like irresistible offers, which kind of got me when I read his book. He wrote 2 books, you guys, 2 books. We've got a celebrity here. One is Make Sales Magical. So that's what we're going to talk about the most today. And the other, how he survived COVID. He spent 6 weeks in a coma, which sounds, terrible. And after that, his business kept on thriving, without him. But after that, once he kind of got out of it, he realized he wants to start shining the light on people and their legacies. And he started a podcast that I was actually on a couple weeks ago. So we're going to talk about a lot today. This guy knows not just marketing and sales, but he also knows what it takes to build a company that will last. So we're not going to talk about any short-term fixes. We're going to talk about how to build a machine that will keep producing, business and leads, and more importantly, how to build more trust with your customers so that you can keep on building your company forever and ever for many years to come. I know it's a lot. Did I miss anything important, Craig, before we kind of jump into it?
No, I think you covered it.
All right. Well, so let's talk about your transition from going from corporate to starting your own company, because you sort of are in sales, right? Because you obviously are, you started your company, you had to sell yourself and then deliver marketing services on top of that. So what kind of drove you to move away from being in the corporate world to starting your own thing?
Well, I had been marketing semiconductors for mobile phones, which was a lot of fun. It was hard work. It was super competitive. I mean, just to give you an idea of the scope, 5 mobile phone makers are responsible for about 95% of mobile phone volume worldwide. And so what that means is, for you to have a viable company, you need to be in 3 out of 5. And so it's very, very competitive. And but it's also highly commoditized, and the prices have been dropping. And I was looking, we had to we had to drop our prices 20% a year on year, while adding more functionality. And I just looked at that and I said, there's the day's coming when they're going to ask me to fly coach to Asia. And I used to go to Asia a lot. I'm like, when that day comes, I'm done. And sure enough, it came. And so when they started asking me to fly coach to Asia, I'm like, yeah, I think I'm done. And so I moved on. And that was kind of it. I had, one little last hurrah, and um, the but I was like, okay, let me do what I've been doing for corporate America and bring it to other companies.
So do you feel like the first time offer was kind of what you talk about in your book, and what is one of the secrets that you talk about? Was that born in the corporate America out of doing a lot of that stuff, or did you come up with that once you started your business and figured out there's only so much you can do with referrals? Kind of, what did the first time offer? Well, first of all, do you want to tell people what that is? Kind of tell them, what does that mean to have a first time offer in your world?
Yeah. So first time offer is a low ticket, irresistible front end offer that you use to move people to your high ticket core offer. And the reason I started doing it is, honestly, I'm not that good at sales, and I kept losing deal after deal after deal. And so at some point I was like, I need to figure this out. And the thought was, if I can't do the sale, then let me create an offer that does all the heavy lifting for me. And so, it's so interesting. I mean, now obviously you're a sales pro, and if you went back and looked at how I was trying to sell, you would have a gazillion tips for me. And one of the things was, Craig, you seem too desperate. You feel like you're trying to push it, and what have you. But that's kind of what I was doing. But once I had this offer, I was able to say, I got to the point of comfort where I was like, I know a qualified buyer will say yes to this offer. So I don't have to worry about selling it. I'm just going to present it. If they want it, great. If they don't want it, I'm going to quit spending time with them. And so I was spending, like 20 to 30 hours pursuing a deal, and 2 out of 3 deals were not coming through. Well, that's just it's not scalable. It's not sustainable. And I didn't feel like it was showing me off for what I could actually do. And that's the problem. Whenever, people go out to multiple bids and they're like, oh, they chose Joe down the street, but they don't know Joe's not going to do this, that, and the other for them. And I was running into that. And my wife would say, they don't realize what they've missed out on. I'm like, yeah, I know. And so it was an attempt to solve that. And so the first time offer, the way we structure it's kind of like a mini project, and you end up working together, and they get to know you and you get to know them. And all of a sudden, some magical things start happening. But one of the things that happens is, as soon as you sell the offer, you're now no longer a salesperson. You are their paid consultant. You're on the inside. And as their paid consultant, they're no longer looking at you as a salesperson. When they look at you as a salesperson, the guard goes up.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So one of the things in your book that I really enjoyed, you compared the marketing process to dating process, which I always think that the dating process always works with recruiting as well, because it's kind of like you want to test people out as you go. And the same thing, when I was reading your book, you talked about how you don't get married on the first date, right? Like, hopefully you go and have a coffee or something, and like we just kind of like, and I like your concept of constantly building that trust over time. So do you want to talk a little bit about what is that process? Obviously people should read your book, of course, but like, how would you summarize the process to build that trust? So you've got a prospect, and then what? Like, what do you do? Like, call, email, or like how do you start taking them through this kind of marketing process of building the trust?
Yeah. So we don't do any cold outreach. And for the high ticket stuff, I don't like it. And, so let's go back to the dating scenario. I actually have a slide in my slide deck. And the slide shows a picture of this creepy guy walking up to a girl in a bar, and she's looking over her shoulder with complete disgust. And and I say, the way we do a lot of high ticket sales is like this guy in the bar. You go up to him and you say, "Hey, you're kind of cute. Can I have your phone number? Better yet, let's just get married." And she's like, "You're creepy. Go away." And so that's the thing that we do. And so I think cold outreach is even more of that. So we don't do cold outreach. We do more of an inbound process. And so it's really trying to engage people. So let me break down the 5 stages, of courtship. So you have an introduction, then you have conversation. If conversation goes well, then you have coffee. If coffee goes well, then you have dinner. And if dinner goes well, then you have commitment. And so the introduction, you need some means of introduction. That could be ads, paid ads. That could be referrals. That could be speaking on stage. It could be a variety of things.
You talk about podcasts. I think you mentioned podcasts for you being a good way to build that.
Yeah, podcast. One of the things that happens on podcast is people hear about you and they hire you. I've had some podcast hosts. Once we're done with the podcast, they're like, "Craig, we need to talk." And so, but it's some form of introduction. Then the next thing is you want to have a conversation. And so remember I said we do a lot of inbound. And one of the things that you hear people use the term lead magnets. I despise that term.
I know you do.
I hate it because it makes me look at my prospect in the wrong light. I picture like a little rat that I'm trying to catch in a trap. And I don't want to think about my prospect that way. And so we call them conversation starters because that's what their goal is. And it's a piece of content that when somebody downloads it, it should add value to them, add value before they even give you money. And the goal is to initiate a conversation. And so once you have that conversation, this is not the time to say, "Hey, I've got a 6-figure contract that I want you to sign." Instead, do what we do in real life. You go on a coffee date, and that coffee date is what we call a first-time offer. Okay. And that's that irresistible offer on the front end. Once you're done with coffee, depending upon price points, you have something else we call an excite to escalate. That's your dinner date. And then commitment is they buy your core offer. But the coffee date is really that. When you go on coffee dates, you don't have any commitment. You remove safety risk, emotional risk, financial risk. You de-risk it in every possible way.
The pressure goes down for sure, because then you don't feel like you gotta sign it on a dotted line right away.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I've heard women say is when they go on these little coffee dates, they have a girlfriend that will call them in about 15 minutes into the date to see if they need a rescue.
Yep. I mean, I've done that, so that's very normal. Right. You definitely don't want to go on the dinner date the first time you're meeting someone. That's just like that's not really that's not really kind of smart, I guess. So when you talk about this high ticket offers, right? Like, what is the typical amount that you see that works well on? So like for our audience, those who are watching this, like, what is a good amount? Like if you are selling, this to this will work for you. And if it's under this probably not going to work for you. Like what does that mean in terms of the high ticket sale for you? High ticket offers.
Yeah. The number we put on our website is like 20K to 2 million.
Okay.
And both ends are a little bit arbitrary. One of the reasons that we put about 20K is at least the offers we design usually end up packing about $5,000 of value. Okay. And so, and what you're doing is you're taking that value out of the lifetime value of that client. And so it really depends upon how much, what the lifetime value of the client is. And if you start dropping below 20K, it just gets hard to pull that off. Now you could structure different types of offers, depending upon how old your audience is. They may remember Columbia House Records. They ran a deal where you could get 13 albums for a penny. and all you had to do was join their record club.
So that's a good example. So for those of you watching, this is a good example that Craig just shared with you, is how other companies using this first-time offer that you've probably have used in the past. Getting small, like, do you want to tell more, like maybe a couple more examples of what that could look like for various clients or various industries that you've worked with?
Yeah. So, well, and here, let me give another example, because the first thing I want to illustrate is the difference between a simple offer and a complex offer.
Okay.
So Columbia House Records, 13 albums for a penny is a simple offer. When I first started this, I was trying something similar to that. Obviously not 13 albums for a penny, but it was similar and it didn't work. And the thing I realized was, for the higher ticket stuff, you need a complex offer, complex front end offer to match a complex high end sale. And so here's one. It's not one of the offers I created, but everybody will get it immediately. Bob Stupak bought a casino in Las Vegas years ago. It was some dumpy thing, almost like a Motel 6. And he decided he was going to turn it into a player on the Vegas Strip. And he renamed it Bob Stupak's Vegas World. Today, you would know it as the Strat or the Stratosphere. But he called it Bob Stupak's Vegas World. And he said, give me $396 and I will give you 3 days and 2 nights in one of my deluxe suites. When you arrive, there will be a bottle of champagne waiting for you in your room. All of your drinks on property are free, whether you're gambling or not. Even if you're sitting in one of our entertainment venues, you pay nothing more for your drinks. Not only that, but for your $396, I will give you $600 of chips to use in my casino. And so this is what I would say is a complex offer. There's 4 deliverables. The room was a 10% discount off the published rate, so that was a deal. Bottle of champagne in a hotel, maybe $100. So not a overwhelming deal, but very, very nice. Now, when you get into 3 days of unlimited drinks, if you're a drinker,
that's a good deal.
It's a good deal. You're there with your spouse or whoever, both of you are drinking. It's a good deal. And then $600 of free, of money, $600 of chips for $396. You're like, heck, just in the gambling money alone, the trip pays for itself. It becomes a no-brainer. And here's what's really powerful about this. So the first thing is, that's a complex offer. Simple offer, 13 albums for a penny. That's kind of one thing. Bob Stupak's offer, you get 4 deliverables. And we found that the best offers have a minimum of 4 and a maximum of 5 deliverables.
Okay.
But the other thing that Bob Stupak's offer does is it attracts his ideal clients, and I wouldn't say scares off, but it's less attractive to his non-ideal clients. So he knows, Bob Stupak knew, that his most profitable clients were people that like to drink and gamble. And if he could get somebody in the casino drinking and gambling, he was about to make a lot of money.
Right.
And so his offer attracts those type of people, free booze and free gambling money. For me, that's not real. I don't gamble, so that's not attractive to me. I drink typically wine, but I don't think for that price he was offering the wine that would get me excited. And so I look at that offer, I'm like, I think I'll go stay somewhere else.
Right.
Which is good, because he went every room in his hotel filled with people that like to drink and gamble. Those were his most profitable clients. So that's an example of a complex offer. And so that's what we found works. So if I start digging in and I think about different fields, so I actually was just doing a call with a client that does offshore software development, and we're still working on the deliverables for them. But some of the things that we may do is, what we have to start by looking at the problem somebody has, and like one of the deliverables is, hey, we're going to help you identify the technology you need to do this. The next thing we're going to do is help you identify the team that you need to do this. Then we're going to have you, what is it, technology team schedule. We're going to give you a schedule to do this. And so it's all this. Now, this one's for like doing a project, where they're going to build the whole software by themselves. Another first time offer. And basically, it gives them everything they need so they can step in. I mean, it's weeks of work that they would normally have to do. It's basically saying, hey, we're going to help you do your planning. So when you go to your investor, or you go to your boss saying, hey, I need funds, this is giving you an idea how much money you need, and it's giving you a rationale to go to your boss and explain that. And it's a good bit of work. But
and they're still paying for that first time offer. It's just not going to be the full blown 6-figure contract yet, right? So
right.
so you're not doing this for free necessarily. You're getting a little bit. You're getting them to coffee, basically. Like you're getting them to taste what it feels like to work with this company, right?
Right. And you know what? And there's a really important point there. I mean, if you're doing sales, everybody's had somebody that came in their sales funnel that either immediately or eventually they figured out they're just wasting their time. They look real, they look like a real prospect, they're saying all the right things. And somewhere in that journey, you figure out, oh, they're just wasting my time. The beauty of these first time offers, because it's paid, once you make that offer, you immediately figure out who you're dealing with. I mean, I'll give you an example. Years ago, I had somebody came in and they were doing this project down in Houston. They said, the thing's fully funded. We're getting ready to break ground. Everything's been approved. By the way, I'm the man. I make all the decisions, this, that, and the other. I just need, I need a marketing plan. And so we kind of talked, and eventually I offered him a first time offer, which was a screaming good deal to help him put together a marketing plan. And you know what he said to me? He said, hey, would you mind writing that up and sending it to me via email? I have to get some people to approve that.
Ooh.
And that was the moment I realized, oh, he's not the man, and he's probably not funded. I think what was really happening was he was working on a pitch deck for his investors to get funding, and he was hoping I could do a free marketing plan for him.
Because one of the things you do talk about, the first time offer has to be under certain amount for that person that you're dealing with to be a no-brainer. So you can see, right? Like, do you want to tell more about that? Because that's kind of an important, piece here.
Yeah. So if anybody ever has to ask permission for how the money is spent, it's priced too high. If somebody will ever be held accountable for how the money is spent, it's priced too high. And so that's what's really key. So when you remove, you want to have some price there to filter out the tire kickers, but you don't want them to ever have to ask money. Again, we're going back to the coffee date. We're removing risk. If they spend this money and it doesn't go well and it looks bad on their performance review, they're going to apply a lot more scrutiny to you before they move forward. So don't do that. Don't put them in a position where they feel like their job's on the line or their reputation's on the line for bringing you on. Make it some amount of money that even if it's a complete waste of money, nobody will ever notice.
Right. Okay. And you have recommendations. You guys can read that in the book, but there's recommendations of like what that amount should be like if you're dealing with a certain amount of like service-wise or whatever the package.
Yeah. So for B2C, generally below 100. For B2B, generally, we've been using often less than 500. More recently, we've been testing less than 1,000.
Yeah.
But it's, again, it has to be an amount of money that they don't have to think about. So it has to add so much value that they know it's an overwhelming value. If they have to do a calculation in their head to figure out if it's a good value, it's not enough value. But you also want it to be so much money that they look at it and they're like, yeah, of course I'd do this.
So have you noticed, like, and I'm sure you guys track because you're marketing people, so you track all these numbers, like in terms of like when somebody buys the first time offer, is there any correlation to what happens to the actual offer? Like what do you notice typically? Is there, maybe it depends on the industry, maybe it depends on the size of the deal, but what do you notice if those who buy the first time offer, how likely are they going to buy the actual offer?
Yeah. So over time, our historic closing rate on the back end has been 80%.
Wow.
Yeah. And there's a bunch
And that's like for your company, or like for your clients that you work with, that you help create this first time offers, right?
well, I have the most history with my company, but it's, it's kind of in the same range for clients. It's because here's what happens when you go in and you do this. All of a sudden, there's like 6 psychological levers we're flipping in the process of doing this.
Or do tell.
Yeah, and when here's one, it's called a sunk cost bias. So sunk cost is, well, hey, I've spent this much money, I might as well continue. And so that's a big one. Another one is the status quo bias. When somebody's not a client of yours, the easiest thing for them to do is continue to not be a client. That preserves the status quo. People resist changing the status quo. So one of the ideas of these first-time offers is it's applying a big sledgehammer to bust up the status quo, to move them from not being a client to being a client. Once they've paid you money, psychologically, it feels more natural to them to pay you money in the future. And so those are a couple of the big ones that move in there. Another one is the IKEA effect. IKEA discovered by chance that when people took their boxed furniture home and assembled it, their perceived value of that furniture was higher than it was really worth. And that's because they invested labor into it. And so we haven't talked about this, but one of the
Sweat and tears.
yeah. So one of the things that makes first time offers work are when people invest, when you do workshops in the delivery of the first time offer, and they're actually working on the problem with you. They feel like they've invested labor into it. And so their perceived value of what comes out of that is higher. And so that's, we've got those, biases that we're trying to move. And that's what contributes to the very high closing rate on the back end. And it's just really,
and there's a lot of communication that's happening, because you get to know, like when we work with our clients, when we help them find salespeople, I always say, the first batch, it's going to be, we could be super off, or we could be super on, because what we talked about, what we discussed, and what we bring to you, you'll be like, that's not what I talked about, or that's not what I wanted. And then you get that kind of back and forth. That feedback is super priceless, because then they're like, they see the improvement as it's happening. So now they're more into it, because they've actually offered some help, and I've been upfront with them, because I can't deliver you. I mean, I've done it before, but it's not the common thing where right off the bat, like the perfect fit, because it's like you need that like kind of I guess adjusting things to make sure that they get what they need.
yeah.
So when you,
But
so that's why I like your process so much, because it creates that working together immediately, where you kind of get to see that you do what you said you're going to do, you keep your promise, and then you're kind of making them look like a hero to their company.
Yeah, and here's something else I think will maybe shock you and shock your audience. And let me put it in the form of a story of one of my clients that we built a first-time offer for. We were kind of reviewing things with them, and they had a sales call, which was great. And like, okay, well, that's awesome. Did you offer the first-time offer? They're like, no, but I booked another sales meeting. And so somebody had told them, hey, don't end the call without booking another meeting. And so they feel like they're doing the right thing. And they were surprised. I was like, well, that's not good news. And they're like, why? We got another meeting. It's like, so now you have 2 meetings where you're the salesperson.
Which is
And
nothing wrong being a salesperson. Like that's great, but you're still having that thing to overcome, because they're still looking at you that you are selling to them versus
right.
working with them.
Right. And obviously, I mean, sales don't happen without salespeople. I'm not knocking that. But
this is where sales and marketing come in.
But let me put it in this context. Let's say you have 6 meetings with people, and at the end of the 6th meeting, they move to your high ticket, you have the high ticket sale. And you have one salesperson, and it could still be the salesperson, but you have one salesperson where the first meeting was a sales meeting and the next 5 meetings were workshops and implementation. And the other person, all 6 meetings are sales meetings.
Yeah, it's no. I know which one I pick.
Right. Because you have now 5 meetings, 5 experiences with them where you're helping them solve problems. You look like one of them. They
Yeah.
think you're working for them. You're working for them already, and you're reinforcing that notion. Hey, you've paid me. I'm working for you. I'm helping you solve these problems.
Yep. No, it's genius. Like, I mean, again, when I read that book, I was like, I never really thought about it like that, because marketing in my head is, I make it something super complicated, right? And that's what so one of the things I want to talk to you today about, because a lot of viewers that watch our stuff, the companies that are founder led, right? They're a couple million, but the founder is still very much involved, in the in the sales themselves, right? And one of the first questions I ask when I interview my prospects for us is, how many of these things have you sold? Like, do you have a system to sell, right? And some of them, when they come to me and they say, well, we sold a couple, but we need somebody to figure out how to sell more, they're usually not the right fit for us, because they haven't really they can't just put a salesperson to sell this yet. They need to figure out the actual, what are they selling? But if they have sold a couple hundred or whatever, and they know how to sell it, then my next question is, well, what's your marketing like?
Yeah.
Right? Because if you don't have marketing, and a lot of them would say, well, the salesperson will have to do the marketing, the lead generation. That's a very particular person, and that's expecting a lot out of a salesperson to do both. So what would you say to those CEOs that are transitioning out of sales, that are looking to get their first salesperson, who they also want to market? Is that a possibility? Have you seen that happen? Does that work out? Kind of, what do you think?
In my experience, salespeople and marketing people are different. Now, you can have them in the same department. I had a guest on one, Leaders and Legacies podcast. That episode's coming live, where he argues below 15 million, sales and marketing should be the same department.
Okay.
It can be the same department, but they're different people. It hit me. This was years ago. I was in the shower and I was thinking about the difference between what makes great salespeople and what makes great marketing people. And it hit me. I was like, and I'm sitting there thinking about what I'm going to do in the day. What are the problems I'm going to solve today? That's what's going through my head when I'm in the shower. And it hit me. I was like, I think when great salespeople are in the shower, they're thinking about who they're going to talk to. And it's just a different personality. I mean, marketing people are putting together systems.
Okay. Yep.
Are the systems people. That's their natural gifting. Doesn't mean they're not great talking to people. I love talking to people, but their natural gifting is building the systems. Great salespeople are the people that are great meeting and connecting with a lot of people in a day. And they can, of course, have kind of a systematic standpoint, but if you want to get the best synergy out of both, you want to have your marketing people building the systems and your salespeople using the systems. I mean, and let the salespeople do what they do best. That they're spending most of their day talking to people, closing deals. Let the marketing people do what they do best. So back to your question about, if a owner is transitioning out, there's a little bit of a chicken and egg thing, but I would say that if the owner is transitioning out, I would build a good system first before you hire a salesperson. And so I think that would be a marketing role. And one of the reasons I think it's important is, a lot of owners, I think they run into somebody who's, says, hey, I'm great with sales, and they make them feel really good, and they hire this person, they bring them in, and then the person flounders. And not only flounders, but maybe can't scale a sales team. Maybe they're a great individual salesperson, but they don't have a system that you can, start bringing people in and hire 5 salespeople next week and have them productive next week. And so I would say to start with marketing and build out the system so that you understand what makes sales work and what makes sales not work.
Right. And I think what I meant by that is that they, a lot of those people that we talk to, they want the salesperson to do the lead generation, right? So they want to go and find the leads. And so that's, to me, it kind of like, first of all, if you are in that role, like I think your book is very helpful to read, because it kind of helps you as a salesperson to understand, like, how do I structure this first time offer? Then when I talk to those prospects and find those leads, I don't have to have like a huge marketing team behind me helping me with everything, right? Because like I mean, I think it's doable reading that book and be like, okay, I can figure out how to structure this first time offer that I can present something without having this big team behind me. So like, because when a company is small or smaller and it's growing, there's only so many resources to spend.
Yeah.
Like I mean, like we talked, who did I talk to? I interviewed somebody and we talked about the levels of scaling. Like, when do you bring your first salesperson? When do you bring your first sales manager? When do you first bring, when you bring in a VP of sales? Because it all matters, like how far the company is scalable. Like from your perspective, like, I mean, marketing obviously is important from day one, but when the resources are limited, like, do you see like the scaling? Like, how would you scale the marketing department as they grow? Like, what do you see to make it super simple and not complicated and not like this big bigaboo that, oh my god, you need to have all of this whistles and blow, and bells? Like, how would you start with marketing when somebody's is growing and scaling without wasting a bunch of time on things that don't really matter?
Well, and this may sound self-serving, but get a fractional CMO.
It's not self-serving at all. I think we do that for a lot of other things, accounting and other things. But okay, so get a fractional CMO, and then like.
Well, here's why I say to do that. When you get a fractional CMO, you're getting somebody who's usually a very senior marketing person that can solve problems quickly for you. And I see businesses that say, there's one guy I know who he's like, oh, I'm going to hire my own inside marketing person. And I was like, okay, what do you want this person to do? And I started asking him. He's like, oh, they're going to do this, that, and the other. And as he started describing it, his name's Isaac. I was like, Isaac, you're describing 5 people. The person, what you just described, I can't hire that person. Or if there's a rare unicorn out there and I find them, they are a lot more expensive than you're looking to spend. And, so when you bring in a fractional CMO, they understand these things, and they can sit there and say, they can help you with the high level strategy. That's the most expensive thing, but it also gives you the biggest return. And then they can help you identify, okay, who are the people that you need to bring on to your team. And actually, if your fractional CMO is good, they can help you hire these people. They can help you specify the roles,
right,
and hire these people. And so that's where, in terms of scaling, that's where I would start. And then it's just a question of how long it makes sense to have the CMO be fractional. In some cases, I mean, I know in the cases, some businesses, they stayed with their fractional CMO until they sold to private equity, for like 300 million, 500 million. So companies that reached, 300, 500 million valuations, they stuck with their fractional CMO all the way to exit.
Well, okay, so here's the question that I think a lot of people will think about. Okay, so I'm hiring. There's so many people that are good, but there's also some people that are not good. So what are the things that you would look for in a fractional CMO? Like, what are the objectives? Like, what kind of things do you expect them to solve when the company is still kind of early on and growing? And then we're going to talk about kind of the later stages. Like, how would you know that somebody is good that you bring on board in terms of the fractional? Like, what kind of priorities and things they focus on, that for you to know that you made a good investment versus just like I hope it works. I don't know.
Yeah. You know, I would look at strategy. Are they talking about strategy or are they focused on tactics? So if they come in and say, um, hey, I know it's going to change your business. We need a video sales letter. We're just going to be able to explode your business using that. Well, a video sales letter, it's not a bad thing, but it's a tactic. It's a
Mm-hmm.
tactic. Um, and as a matter of fact, I use that as an example because, I have a prospect in my funnel right now that his marketing agency was like, "Oh yeah, you need a video sales letter," and he asked me what I thought about that, and I said, "What's the strategy?" And he didn't have an answer for that.
Okay.
So, a a true senior marketing person, they're going to start with the strategy, and then just find the tactics to help them achieve the strategy. And so, if I were looking to give a business owner who's not a marketer, just something to look for, are they talking about strategy or are they talking about tactics?
So
Tactics are going to sound like, hey, we're going to do this little thing or that little thing. Those are tactics.
So somebody comes to you and says, "Okay, our goal next year is to double our business." And let's say they start at, I don't know, making it up, 3 million. So we want to double our business with the help of marketing. So what kind of like would you sit down, like what kind of things would you be like, "Okay, we need to make sure you got this. Maybe ideal profile is figured out. We need to make like, what are some of the things that they need to really be evaluating?" Because strategy could sound very up in the sky, but do you kind of tie that strategy to some kind of objective or some kind of numbers that they're trying to go for, or it doesn't truly matter? Like what?
Well, I think my first question for somebody that says that is, what makes you think you can double your business? I'm not saying they can't, but um, there's some reason, there's probably some reason they believe they can double their business. And so this is where we start getting back into strategic questions. The more junior marketer is going to say, "Oh yeah, I can do that for you. I can do it. Here's the way I can do it." The more senior marketer is going to say, "What makes you think you can do that?" And if they come back and say, "Well, this is a $100 million market." Well, you said 3 million. This is a $1 billion market, and I've got $3 million in sales.
Right.
And so there's all sorts of opportunity out there that I know I'm not tapping into. Okay, here's where we're stepping into more of the strategic questions. Okay, that's great. You're missing the majority of the market. What's the part of the market that you found that you can knock down the easiest? Of that $1 billion market, which are the easiest sales for you to get? And all of a sudden they start saying, well, it's this group of people. So let's talk like accounting. Um, the accountant says, look, we focus just on engineering organizations. I'm changing. I had a different real situation in my head. We focus just on engineering organizations. Like, okay. And if you're talking to an engineering organization, you feel like they're the easiest one for you to close. Yeah. Okay. What's keeping you from reaching more engineering organizations? So now we're starting to get
Right.
into those type of things. And and maybe it's exposure. But it's really starting with, there's not an easy answer to how do you double revenue next year. That's great at a high level thing. I don't know anybody that wouldn't want to double revenue in the next year.
Right.
But what's more important is that a realistic goal? If it is, great. What's kept you from doing it? And what part of the available market is the easiest for you to close first? Let's not start with the hardest prospects first. Let's start with the easiest prospects first and get that faster growth, but also use that growth to finance pursuing the harder prospects.
Well, so then that is gold right here, right? Because you're able to bring the questions back to the CEO versus like, okay, we can do this for you, instead of like, okay, well, here are the questions. How about this and this and this, and kind of go through the checklist to make sure that they know what they're getting into. Because a lot of times, what happens is that sales is doing their thing; they're running around wild trying to bring business in. Marketing is doing their thing, and what we're seeing a lot of times, they're not really connected. Or, when the company gets a little bit bigger and there's this marketing qualified lead, the marketing brings us leads, and you have no idea how many times I've heard from salespeople in interviews that those leads are not good. Well, it's like, okay, well, why are they not good? I mean, there's clearly some kind of misconnect that's happening between the two, right? And so that's why when marketing and sales work together, it's magic. When they don't, it's like, again, like if I had $1 for every salesperson who told me marketing leads were not great, I would be like a billionaire by now. Like it's so much of that. But then why spend all this money on marketing, but then your salespeople almost have this not controversy, what's a like tense relationship with marketing. Like they don't trust marketing, right? And so what you were talking about is kind of bringing this all together, and especially like doing it right from the beginning. Because I mean, is there anything you want to say about that? Because I'm sure you've had stories as well when marketing and sales were just like two children that are just not playing well together, and that created a bunch of
Well,
mess.
let me use an example of kind of a failure on my part that I think would help, where I learned some lessons. So we had a client that sold professional liability insurance to attorneys, and we've been growing their prospects. We've been growing their leads and what have you, and been going really well. And I was meeting with the GM once, and he said, our most profitable clients are the ones with multi-attorney offices instead of solo attorneys. And I took that and I said, okay, got it. And I went to my ads guy and I said, hey, what could you do to get fewer solo attorneys and more multiple ones? And so we changed the advertising strategy to start filtering out the solo attorneys.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what happened was the total number of leads went down, but they had a long sales cycle. And what we found when we looked at when the leads came in, so I think it was like 6 or 8 weeks, we ran, this little experiment where we changed the ads to kind of exclude the solo attorneys, and the leads went down. But from that period of time, those leads that came in then, the deal value per deal was more than double what had been before. And the total revenue was, I forgot what it was. I'd have to go back and check my notes, but the total revenue had gone up significantly. And so we achieved everything that we set out to do. But here's where the dysfunction came in. I didn't set expectations on the front end.
Mm-hmm.
The assumption that, hey, they know they have a long sales cycle, or, and this will go through. And so all they saw was, hey, the number of leads coming in is going down, and their salespeople started freaking out and they got upset. And they said, I'm like, but their deal values, the dollars per deal is going up and the total is going up. And what ended up happening was we spent a lot of time fighting back and forth about what the real numbers were. So if I could go back and have a redo on that, what I would say is I would lay out some parameters. And before we launched this, I would say, okay, guys, here's what we're going to do. We're going to start excluding. Now, this will probably mean the total number of leads go down, but we're going to track this, and we're going to track this of the leads that come in during this period of time. And we're going to see, because we know it takes 60 to 90 days to close these deals. We're going to track what happens on these journeys. And here's how we're going to look at the calendar. So that was one of the places of misalignment. They looked at it as, hey, during these months that you ran this deal, our revenue went down. I'm like, yeah, but those were leads that came in before we started running this, because you have a long sales cycle.
Right.
We didn't get agreement on basically what we're going to do and how we're going to measure success. And so that's, if I could go back and redo that, that's what I would do, is I would go back and redo it. And it ended up being really frustrating because the sales guys were frustrated. And we were frustrated because we did some really, really good work that we never got credit for. And so everybody walks away frustrated and feeling defeated. And it should have been something that people were celebrating. But they ended up never going back to what we had done. And we had a proven way to increase deal value and the total revenue.
So you kind of bring a really good point. So the objectives, obviously, like the objective of marketing is how did you find the biggest marketing objective in the business?
I would say, and I think I put this in my book, create an environment where people want to buy.
Right. And then sales takes that and then closes them. So, right, like marketing can only take you so far. They can bring people to your coffees, right? But it's still up to sales to take them all the way. Now, you talk in your book on how to increase the close rate by doing a lot more trust building up front with marketing.
Yeah.
Right. And so, which is great, because then your close rate goes from here to over here. So that helps salespeople close more deals. But I think it's very important to remember that marketing is not responsible for the whole thing. So I like how you said in this story that the outcome, even though it was a great outcome, but because it wasn't discussed in the beginning or addressed in the beginning, even though it was great work, some people were still being like, but it's affecting, my commission or this or that. I'm not setting a lot of leads. And then the marketing gets blamed for something that wasn't in harmony with each other. So I'm sure you have other stories that kind of show, but to me, those who are watching this and are responsible for sales, you've got to be like, what advice would you give to those people that are responsible for sales execution to help marketing the most? To help marketing help them better. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, what can they do?
Yeah, I would say, I would go back to, like Stephen Covey's 7 Habits. I mean, we could just take those 7 habits of highly effective people. One of them is seek to understand before seeking to be understood. So much of the tension between sales and marketing is communication. And I would say the same thing to marketers. As a marketer, many times I've been frustrated with the sales team. But
what? What a shocker!
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've seen millions of dollars evaporate in the middle of the night by a twitchy sales guy who gave a price discount after the buyer had already told him we were the only person in the world that could meet their ramp.
And I mean, yikes! That to me, oh gosh, that's a whole other conversation about things that you don't want your sales team to do.
But but also, if I go back to, and this was back in my semiconductor days, I mean, the sales guys would come and say, hey, our customers are telling this, and this. And I got to say, there were times I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. And when I would go out on the road, I'd hear it from the customer. I'd come back, like, hey, we need to be working on this. And the sales guy would be like this, face planning. So, it goes both ways. I would say the same thing to marketing as I would say to sales. Seek to understand before seeking to be understood. Begin with an end in mind. And so the advice I would give to the salespeople is, if your marketing people aren't bringing that attitude to you, be the agent of change, be the leader in that situation, and seek to understand them. Once people are understood, they're open to so many things. Chris Voss, who wrote Never Split the Difference, talks about that. I mean, he's unwound $10 million hostage deals just by seeking to understand before seeking to be understood. When the kidnapper heard their complaint worded in a way that they just blurted out, "That's right," all of a sudden things started softening. And the demand, and he gives one story, which was in the Philippines, the demand for that hostage went from 10 million to nothing immediately.
Right.
So that would be my advice. And to recognize, I think both marketing and sales need to recognize there are different skills. Both are necessary. Both are necessary. Marketing is not your enemy. They're going to make you look awesome. And I would say the same thing to marketing. Sales is not your enemy. They're going to make your work shine. If you can't figure out how to work with sales, it doesn't matter how good your marketing is. If they're not closing deals, at some point, the whole system's broken.
Right. No, exactly. Do you know, in all like 15 years you've had your own business, have you seen the biggest kind of gold mine for marketing when marketing comes in to a company to uncover? Like, where would you say like the biggest gold mines lie? So for those founders or CEOs or sales leaders that are watching, like, where would be, I don't even know if there is such a thing, but I'm guessing
Oh, yeah.
there is.
Oh, yeah.
But like, what would you say to that? Where's the biggest gold mine?
As soon as somebody tells me that's not how it's done in our industry, that's when I know I've struck gold.
Interesting. Tell me more.
Yeah, so they come in, they're like, we throw out something like, well, that's not how it's done in our industry. I'm like, okay, why? And usually there's just a bunch of assumptions that are thrown out there. And so let me make this real practical. If you're selling cars, you have to set up a network of dealers. That's how it's done.
Right.
Well, guess what? Tesla just busted that up. Tesla's the most valuable car company in the world. And they completely destroyed the whole concept of dealerships. And the way they designed the Teslas, they did away with standard assumptions. So there's no AC knobs, you don't see the knobs and what have you on the dash.
Yep.
And they just went through and destroyed assumptions. And, I know a lot of people don't like Elon Musk right now. Don't care. He has the most valuable car company in the world. Get over your personal dislike. What did he figure out that his competitors didn't? Look into that. There's something to learn. And so that's what ends up happening. And so if I go back to this, the professional liability insurance client, sure enough, one day I got the line, well, hey, that's not how it's done in our industry. And I looked at him, I said, hey, is your goal to be average? And he was like, well, no, we're not average. That's not only is that not our goal, we're not average, we're exceptional. I'm like, well, if you do what everybody else in your industry is doing, then you're mathematically limited to being average.
Wow. That's a big one. That's I'm scratching my head because that's kind of like, that's a big gold mine. The second you say that's how it's been done, like, so your ears perk up. Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. And so here's another reason that's a gold mine. If that's not the way it's done in your industry, you can count on all of your competitors continuing to not do it that way.
Okay.
And if there's a reason, reasonable way to start doing it differently, these guys are going to sit there and they're going to mock you. They're going to dig into their positions. They're like, oh, Olga is doing this. She's nuts. She doesn't understand how it's done in this industry. We're going to keep doing it this way. While you're just kind of pulling ahead. And once you've gained so much market share, they're like, oh. And
yeah, I mean, look at Tesla. They're like, I mean, they're, again, hate them or love them, but like they're ahead on so many ways in terms of like even their own distribution. Like they don't have to have sales every year. the car updates itself every couple, like every couple weeks, my car gets updated because like they do that. I don't have to buy the newest model. I got the newest software on my car right now that I can go drive. It's amazing. Like they don't have sales. Like they don't have the end of year sale. Like, I mean, maybe they have some other things, but fascinating. Okay, I have last question before we wrap this up. And is it okay if I go a couple minutes?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So here's and I don't know how complicated this question would be, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How do you know, like those of us who watch this, CEOs, sales leaders, salespeople, how would you know pretty quickly if somebody has their marketing dialed in?
So there's some nuts and bolts questions, and the nuts and bolts would be, do they know their lifetime value of a client? Do they have what gas pedals can they press that they know will immediately increase revenue? If you had to go increase sales by 10% tomorrow, what would you do that? If they don't know the answer to that, then they don't have, they haven't built again, marketing is about systems, sales is about people. And that says that they don't have a system where they can say, okay, if we fuel this a little bit more, and then we add a couple extra salespeople to handle the extra business coming in, we can grow revenue 10%. So it would be looking at things like that. And let me just kind of talk at a higher level. This is something that I think a lot of people just get wrong. They think in marketing, if their marketing is about their product or service, this is going to sound really contrarian, but if their marketing is about their product or service, they don't have their marketing dialed in. One of the jobs of marketing is to create an emotional bond. So we talked about, you want your business to be irresistible. And we say, that's part of what we say is we make your business irresistible to cautious buyers. And what that is part of marketing. This is a little bit more the branding side. And I'm not talking about fonts, colors, and logos when I say branding. I'm talking about the emotional connection where people just want to buy from you just because you're you. That unexplainable, it factor. When your marketing's dialed in, your business has that it factor that people just want to move into. Now, the marketing guy understands how to build that it factor if you have the right marketing guy, but you're not going to get the it factor if you're just running tactics like, hey, we're going to do video sales letters. I'm like, that's not the it factor.
Interesting. This is fascinating. So those who are watching, like, if you can answer those questions, you gotta figure it out. And if you don't, you gotta talk to Craig. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wished people ask you? So I always end up with that question, like anything that you wish we talked about that we didn't.
You asked really good questions. Yeah, here's a question. What's the difference between branding and direct response?
Okay, and how would you answer that?
Okay. The vast majority the vast majority of marketers that you're going to run into are direct response. That means you run an ad today, you get paid today, you put the money in the bank tomorrow. That's direct response. And the problem with direct response is it's transactional. It's not relational. You made an offer, they said yes to your offer, and you moved on. If you want to have the highest value customers, you need to do relational, which is branding. And so in reality is you need a combination of branding ads with direct response ads. And because the direct response kind of drives the sales, but the branding ads creates that it factor. It creates that emotional bond where people just want to buy from you for reasons that they can't fully explain. They have explanations. And I'll give you an example where I just saw this. I was looking in a client account recently, was talking with a client about this morning. It was like, hey, there was this lead that came in October and they did absolutely nothing. And then they just show up in December and they booked a call. And I said, do you know did anything happen in between? I said, there's nothing in, we use HubSpot. I was like, there's nothing in HubSpot. It's like, no, I don't know why they booked a call. I was like, okay, I know why. I mean, because think about that. You have a lead come in October. As a salesperson, would you ever call here we are in December. Would you ever call a lead that's 2 months old that hadn't been touched in 2 months and expect them to even know who you are when you get on the phone with them?
Right.
But this person reached out to us and booked the call, or out to my client.
Right.
And that's because we can't track it. This is, this upsets the folks that are all big on attribution. We can't track this. But the only thing that will answer that question is they saw our branding ad. They saw our branding ad that created that emotional bond. And they went back and they found an old email that had a link to book a meeting. And they booked a meeting. So if you only run direct response, you're only going to be dealing with transactional customers that are going to be your lower profitable customers, and direct response burns out. If you run a combination, direct response and branding, you're going to see these magical things where people just out of the blue book calls, say, hey, I want to talk to you.
I love it. And I hope you guys notice how many kind of emotional words Craig uses, irresistible, magnetic. There's all these things that you're like, ooh, I want to know more. It's like you don't hear those words very often, but it's true. Like the branding is not about fonts. I mean, it is important, but it's not. Like it's the brands that, like I have an Apple, very super unlikely I'll ever get an Android phone. It's just because I'm connected to that brand, whether or not you love it or not. And like what can we do in marketing to create more of that, connection? So this was so interesting and so thought-provoking. I learned a lot today, and I appreciate you coming. I know for those of you who want to learn more about you, where can they find you? Besides obviously getting your book, I'll drop a link to the books in the chat. But where can they find you? And I think you have something special that you want to offer those who watch this.
Yeah. So they can come to my website, which is alliesforme.com. That's ALLIES, the number 4, ME.com. They can find me there. They can find me on LinkedIn. I think if you Google Craig Andrews, I think the number 1 LinkedIn Google result is my LinkedIn profile. And so that's a way of finding me. Love it if they read, Make Sales Magical or Hope That Won't Die. And I'll be honest, I like Hope That Won't Die a little bit more than Make Sales Magical. It was a more fun, more enjoyable book to write, and talking about bigger things. But if they're looking to increase sales, Make Sales Magical is probably a good book.
And you also have a podcast that, do you want to plug in and kind of?
Yeah, Leaders and Legacies. And as a matter of fact, we're always looking for great guests on the podcast. We're looking for typically owners of SMBs who are making an impact beyond themselves. And so we'd love to have you be a guest on our podcast. Love for you to listen to the podcast. And I do have a gift. And so we talked a lot about first-time offers. I made a lot of mistakes in making first-time offers. I wouldn't say I've made all the mistakes, but I've made a lot of mistakes. And so I put together a guide to help people avoid some of the mistakes I made. And we also have a course, and we're offering 23 days access to this course on building first-time offers. The reason we limit it to 23 days is we study human behavior. And I know if I give you unlimited access to the course, you will sign up for it and never take it. We want to change lives. And so we put that cap on there, and guess what? It shows up in the analytics. People come in, they blah, 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 blah. They go right through it. You got 23 days is plenty of time.
Love it.
And so the way they can get that is they go to Allies for Me. Again, that's ALLIES, number 4 ME.com. And then just add a /Olga, all lowercase, OLGA, alliesforme.com/OLGA. And that will take them to a page. Just sign up and they'll get the gifts.
You are so generous. Thank you so much for your generosity. And I put the link already in the LinkedIn live event. So underneath the event, you can see that. Thank you for being generous with your time, with your wisdom, and with everything you do. I mean, your podcast about legacies is huge. I think it's important to talk about it, just thinking beyond transactions and everything, just kind of what impact do you have? I always enjoy talking to you. I'm sure I'll bring you more in the next year. We can talk about this forever, because I think, sales is great, but if marketing and sales are not working together, it's just so much harder. It's like trying to make a pool or dig the hole for the pool with a fork. It's like just so much harder to work than if you bring in like some heavy duty machinery, and that's what marketing is. So I'm super grateful that you came and kind of talked about the perspective of as a business owner, like what that looks like and how to be successful in that. All right, well, thanks for being here. Any last minute words, or we're good?
This has been great, Olga. Thanks for having me.
All right, well, we'll see you later. Stay on for a sec. Bye.